Never has a trigger been pulled so slowly. The painstaking buildup to the Senate rules change known as the nuclear option continued this week as members of the Senate from either side of the aisle trooped to the microphone with the certainty that comes only with full frontal partisan debate. They quoted the Bible, they likened opponents to Hitler, that happened today. They cried, they yelled. The party leaders, Bill Frist of Tennessee and Harry Reid of Nevada, laid out their arguments in blueprint.
The issue is that we have leadership-led partisan filibusters that have obstructed not one nominee, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in a routine way.
If Republicans roll back our rights in this chamber, there will be no check on their power. The radical right wing will be free to pursue any agenda they want.
But that's just what was happening on the Senate floor. Dan Balls knows what else was up. What would that have been, Dan?
Well, Gwen, there's two things going on. One is obviously the Senate floor, and there's an important step that occurred today, and that is that the Republicans filed a motion to shut off debate on the nomination of Priscilla Owen. This actually does set the stage for a clash on Tuesday, if there is not a compromise. The real interesting story this week has been behind the scenes. There has been a group known now as the Gang of 12 that has been meeting all week, shuttling from office to office, trading paper, negotiating, renegotiating. They are trying to figure out a way to avert this clash on the floor. And they have come close at points to looking like they're going to get an agreement, but they're stuck on some very important issues. They broke on Thursday night. There'll be some informal things over the weekend. They will resume on Monday. If they are able to get an agreement, they have it in the power of themselves to be able to enforce it and to, in a sense, frustrate everybody else who wants to see this clash.
Who are the Gang of 12 and why does it matter which components are part of this group?
Well, it's a very eclectic group. You have moderates, you have mavericks like John McCain, you have old bulls like John Warner, Senator Robert C. Byrd of West Virginia. You have some newcomers. You've got Mark Pryor of Arkansas, a Democrat. You've got Ken Salazar, who's brand new. You've got Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. You've got some people who are there because they care very much about the institution. You've got some people there who not only care about the institution, but they generally like to see bipartisanship in the Senate. Everybody has their own slightly different interest in this, and they're trying to figure out both language and a kind of an accommodation with one another to be able to head this off.
Dan, I know this is enormously complicated. It was enormously complicated to follow this, but what essentially is the nature of the disagreement?
The disagreement is this. The Democrats want to preserve, even though in this group, they're generally against filibustering, they want to preserve the right to filibuster because they say that's part of the Senate rules. So they have written into the agreement that they would only filibuster under the most extraordinary of circumstances. They are asking the Republicans in this group not to invoke the nuclear option at any point in the 109th Congress. The Republicans say, well, you're asking us to live up to the letter of an agreement by giving us no out if things go awry, but you're only living up to the spirit. The Republicans want some balance, some ability, if things blow up, to go back and invoke the nuclear option. And they've tried and tried and tried, and they can't quite get over that hump.
Dan, what happens to Priscilla Owen? What happens to that nomination?
Well, if there is an agreement, she will probably get through. This group has, in fact, kind of carved up the futures of the most controversial of the Bush nominees, and they've worked out a plan of sort of who gets through and who doesn't.
That's the part they kind of agree on,
That
right?
is the one area where they agree on it. It's quite interesting that they've kind of reached an agreement, not just on who gets through, but who won't get through. So it's relatively clear, and she's one of the ones that the Republicans cared very much about. And this Gang of 12 has sort of said, okay, she'll get a pass, essentially. Some of the others will not get through, despite the fact that Republicans in the Senate and the mainstream, in the conservative groups, want all of them to get through, and the White House obviously does too.
So the nuclear option sounds like something pretty scary, considering it's generally a bunch of guys in suits and wingtips who are going to be pulling this off. What is it actually going to look like? What is going to actually happen at high noon on Tuesday?
Yeah, you would be led to believe after all this buildup, there's going to be smoke coming out the top of the Capitol.
Figuratively, there may well be by the time this is over, assuming there's no compromise. On Tuesday, there will be a cloture vote, a vote to shut off debate. That requires 60 votes. It does not not any likelihood at this point that the Republicans will be able to shut off the debate. At that point, Senator Frist, the majority leader, will make a point of order, basically saying there ought to be a way to, cut this off, and we want a ruling from the chair that enough time has gone on a judicial nominee for that to happen. Vice President Cheney presumably will be in the chair. He will rule on behalf of Senator Frist, at which point the Democrats will appeal it. And then there will be a roll call vote, and that's the moment of truth.
Where's the White House in all of this? They've been kind of interestingly quiet.
Well, they've been interestingly active. They've been quiet about it, but there's no question about how active they're involved. And there are some folks, some scholars that I talked to this week who believe that they have intervened as much in the executive branch as anybody since Franklin Roosevelt tried to pack the court. But they have been not terribly overt. Vice President Cheney, of course, has had some things to say about it publicly. I think he's done some work behind the scenes as well, but they've tried not to be overly intrusive.